Greetings and salutations. This is Abdelhadi with The Bitter Truth, where we may not have all the answers, but we're going to ask an awful lot of questions. You can also become a supporter of the show by visiting thebittertruth.info, INFO, and there you'll see our Patreon link and some fabulous swag to make your life better. If you want to just do a one-time donation, that's always appreciated as well. Obviously, we don't take advertising and all of that kind of thing. So whatever support we get, we appreciate. So anyway, wanted to kind of jump into some things here really quick. We're coming into the midterms, and basically, if I have one mission in this life, it's to get people to stop voting for Democrats. I mean, it's obvious that you shouldn't be voting for Republicans, but both of these parties are just decrepit pieces of crap who are just slaves to the kleptocracy. There's a one party, one money system in this country, and if you think we have a democracy, or if you think Trump broke it, you're sadly misinformed. So for like over the last 40 years, I want to say close to 50 probably, but let's just say over the last 40 years, we keep getting into this lesser of two evils. I remember hearing that when I was a kid during the Reagan campaign, 1980. Both sides, were Carter, Reagan. Oh, well, vote for the lesser of two evils. And so, what ended up happening, we got Reagan, who was significantly more evil than Carter, and Carter was not a very good president. If you know anything about Jimmy Carter, he gets a lot of praise for his house building stuff and everything. But the fact is he was the guy that got us into Afghanistan because he was listening to right-wing idiots like Zbigniew Brzezinski. And if that name sounds familiar, is because he's Mika Brzezinski's dad. And if you don't know who she is, she's on Morning Joe with Joe Scarborough, and she basically runs a right-wing, corporate-funded talk show pretending to be liberal. But the lesser of two evils argument is basically just transported us into just getting the lesser evil and more effective evil every time. I mean, I never thought I would say this after 2016, because at 2016, I thought this is the worst campaign I've ever seen. These are the worst candidates I've ever seen. And then lo and behold, 2020 came and we got Biden and Trump. I was like, oh, it can't get worse than Clinton and Biden, or Clinton and Trump. And suddenly, well, yeah, it did. It got worse than Clinton and Trump, because then it was Trump and Biden. And, I'm pretty sure Kamala Harris is going to get the nomination in 2024. It's been a long time since an incumbent administration member did not get the nomination. That's pretty much been the habit for a long time. So I doubt very much the Democrats are going to turn tail and do anything bold and progressive and nominate Bernie Sanders or, somebody. But anyway, that being said, we're probably going to get another right-wing fascist. Not like we don't have a right-wing fascist now. Joe Biden is a right-wing fascist, but he just tweets nicer things, and, he's a Democrat. So if they're a Democrat, they're nice. Any blue will do. Okay. Say that. Remind me of Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema again. But let's go back into the time machine, shall we? A little bit. The Democratic Leadership Council was founded in 1985. A bunch of the Watergate babies, as they like to call themselves, a bunch of Democrats that came up in the 70s. Excuse me. And then, really under Bill Clinton and Al Gore, because Al Gore was a pretty powerful senator before he took the vice presidentship job, whatever, in 1992. But the DLC was founded in 1985. And the basic premise with these guys is they were basically tired of losing, and they didn't want McGovern anymore. They didn't want Jimmy Carter anymore. These anomalies that weren't fitting business, and they purposefully ditched labor, didn't care about minorities, didn't care about blacks or Mexicans or whatever. Their attitude was, well, where are you going to go? You're going to vote for us, or you're going to vote for the Republicans. Where are you going to go? That's the attitude. And I don't know if you ever saw that clip of Joe Biden on a Zoom call with a bunch of civil rights leaders not long after the election, a couple of weeks into November after the election. And he's basically saying, hey, what do you want? I did all kinds of things for you when we were the Obama administration. What more do you want? First of all, Joe Biden's a liar. He didn't do anything for civil rights or minorities or anything. His entire career has been corporate owned and pro-police, pro-prison. And if you know anything about the crime bill, with which most of you don't, it seems because people voted for Joe Biden, ignoring the crime bill, but yet they were all about BLM. And to be fair, that's how bad Trump was, how stupid he was. There was a lot of dumb things that he did, and he was an abominable piece of shit. But Joe Biden is equally abominable, if not more, because he has more blood on his hands because he cheerleaded every war that we have been in the last 20 years. He was responsible for the crime bill, which made 53 different things a death penalty violation, which blows my mind. I mean, are you putting in parking tickets? What are you doing? But it exploded the already on its way to being privatized prison system. And people love to point out that only 10% of prisons are private. But under Joe Biden, state and federal prisons were now allowed to basically, cooperate and, get kickbacks from vendors. That's a bad word to say, but it's legal. That's why J-Call, which is a phone service that prisoners have to pay top dollar for to talk to their families. They can no longer just use the phone and call collect. They got to go through this thing. And, a $5 call costs $15. That's just to give you an example. But that's Joe Biden. Okay. So anyway, but 64% voted for him. Or I'm sorry, voted against Trump, whereas only 36% voted for Joe Biden. That's an actual statistic. 34% of the Biden voters actually voted for Joe Biden because they're brainless knotheads and they think he was a great guy. But the other 64% that voted for Joe Biden were simply voting against Donald Trump because, and I'm going to cover this toward the end, because they're too chicken shit to vote for somebody else. God forbid you vote for Gloria La Riva or somebody else. If 30 million Americans, and I'll say this again a few times today, if 30 million Americans had balls and would vote a third party, the Democrats and Republicans would be scared shitless and they would finally do something and ignore their corporate donors. Because if you're voted out of office, you can't help Amazon. That's just a fact. I know Jeff Bezos wants to, change that, but right now it's the way it is. But the DLC basically took the Democratic Party and steered it right. And under the Clinton, leadership, he passed DOMA, which, if you're not familiar, is the Defense of Marriage Act, which meant at the time when this was passed in 1994, that gays could not get married. Gay people could not get married, right? They couldn't do it. It was illegal. He made it illegal. He made it a federal law that gays could not get married and went on the 700 Club to brag about it. Now, it got overturned by the Supreme Court in 2015, and that hence, now gays can get married. And here, and how far have we come? Now people don't really even care. But what's amazing about this is when you talk about DOMA, they love to say that, well, George Bush was all about it. Yeah, he sure fucking A was. But Bill Clinton, with the Democratic Congress, by the way, passed it and signed it into law, right? Went on the 700 Club with Pat Robertson, a Christian TV show, to brag about the fact that he's not cool with the gays either. Passed the crime bill. I just talked about the crime bill that Biden wrote, co-authored, which codified the racist prison system. We already had a prison system that was based on slave labor anyway. It's kind of the 13th Amendment, the little slip in there. Slavery is illegal unless you're in prison, and then we can slave the shit out of you, which, Jim Crow for over 100 years, and then the modern prison system. And we are the largest penal colony in the world. We are not 5% of the world's population, but we are like 27% of the world's prison population. That's weird. We have more prisoners in the United States than China does. There are 1.6 billion. We have more prisoners than they do. And when you look at who we imprison, mostly drug users, because 50% of people in prison are nonviolent drug offenders. Only a handful of those people are busted for trafficking. So you got nonviolent drug offenders in prison with rapists and murderers, and they're making license plates, and they're making phones for AT&T, and they're making underwear for Victoria's Secret, and they're making uniforms for McDonald's. That's the crime bill. Clinton signed that. The Communications Act, which before the Communications Act, we had something like 300 media companies in this country. And the law back then was you could not own more than 2 media concerns. Well, now only 5 companies own all of the media that you see and or listen to and or consume. So publishing companies, magazines, TV, radio, most of the internet. If you look at YouTube, some people call it CIA tube for a reason. They quash and censor, demonetize and deplatform shows like this. I'm not big yet, so when I mean big, I don't mean like famous. I just mean I don't have a lot of numbers. So they're not coming after me yet. But people like Graham Elwood, demonetized. Many people deplatformed. Just last week, Redacted Tonight, which I follow quite closely. Lee Camp has been on this show before. He's been demonetized, and pretty soon they're going to deplatform him. They just took RFK Jr. off of Twitter because of his book, The Real Anthony Fauci. And I'm kind of thinking, geez, if this does not mark the end, there's no beginning of the end. We are ending. Okay, China is now the richest country in the world because they don't spend their money on stupid shit like we do. And I'll get it on another show. But now 5 companies own all of the media that you watch. That's why MSNBC and Fox sound strangely similar, right? Except for the culture war crap. And I don't mean to say crap like I'm dismissing it, because abortion rights are a real thing. Gay rights are a real thing. But let me give you an example. If the Democratic Party really gave a crap about women's rights to choose, then, for example, I don't know, if we had a Democratic Congress who could write and pass a law in the Senate and have the president sign it, making abortion the national law of the land, and you couldn't screw with it, then that would be that, wouldn't it? But they don't do it because it's a fundraising issue. The Republicans use the gay marriage thing in the same way. It's a fundraising issue. When they were running things and had a majority, they could have tried to do another version of DOMA again if they wanted to, and it might have passed. And President Trump might have signed it into law, but they didn't. Right. And it's just because they won't. They want it. It's fundraising. Right. And I'm not saying that would be a good idea. I'm just saying it's like the Batman and the Joker. Right. You have to have a Joker. Otherwise, there's no franchise. There's no series. That's how religion works. God and the devil. If there's no devil, then God's out of business. That's why this, when God gets here, well, why doesn't God just fix the devil now? Because this is all bullshit. But I digress. So, Clinton gutted Glass-Steagall, which was a FDR New Deal era law, which prevented banks from taking your money, or taxpayer money, because we give banks money, but taking your money and investing that money into things they want to do. Before, banks could only invest their money, whatever their profits were. They couldn't invest the account holders' money. They also could not invest. For example, you could not have a mortgage company invest in, mortgages, right? You couldn't have insurance companies investing in banks. It was to separate the commercial and the private entities. We took that wall down under Bill Clinton, and 2000 we had the bomb crash. 2008 we had the the mortgage crash, which we bailed out with TARP. I'll get into that in a second. And then the COVID crash, which we just spent like $7 trillion in this country bailing out banks and corporate oligarchs, making the top 1,000 people richer. Right. But that all came from failures created by the gutting of Glass-Steagall. We went through a couple of depressions. These were not recessions. These were depressions. And if you don't remember, a year and a half ago, we had food lines in this country at food banks that ran out of food. That's not a recession. That's a depression. Under Clinton, we had NAFTA, which basically gutted the U.S. and Mexico labor force, and especially in the United States, it finished the job on destroying unions in this country. In the 60s, we had a 40% union participation. Now we've got a 6% union participation. And if you're familiar with what unions do or what they are, now we only have like the federal unions, the federal worker unions, police and fire unions, some teacher unions, but it's only 6% of union participation now compared to 40%. And in most states with the right to work issue like we have here in Texas, or right to work laws like we have here in Texas, the unions aren't really unions. They're basically glorified associations. We have 9 counties out of 254 counties here in Texas that have collective bargaining rights, meaning they can, behave like a union, right? Which means they're able to go on strike and everything else. Everything else in the other 245 counties in Texas, it's right to work, which means these are basically associations. They negotiate for better pensions. I know a few associations here in Austin that haven't gotten a living wage raise in like 14, 15, 16 years, right? So, excuse me. but NAFTA finished gutting the unions in this country. And then in Mexico, we destroyed the farmer in Mexico. It was something like 2 million farmers went broke. And those farmers became farm workers in the United States coming to the US. So all the promises of NAFTA, creating better jobs and everything else was a big fat lie that satisfied the oligarchs. And we basically bribed China to take our jobs. And, we keep accusing them of stealing our jobs. Our oligarchs who own this country paid China to take those jobs. So know that. And that was under Bill Clinton. Okay. Just so you know, Reagan and Bush couldn't pass this stuff. They had a big wet rubbery one trying to pass this stuff. NAFTA is Reagan era, right? That's a Reagan era thing. DOMA, they've been talking about that for years, making gay marriage illegal, right? Reagan and Bush couldn't get it done. There's no way. Republicans aren't charming. They're not charming. They come off too straight, and they're not cool, and they don't say the right things. They talk about family values and all this stupid shit that none of us really believe, because if we did, we would have a 70% divorce rate in this country. We don't believe any of this shit. It's kind of like American foreign policy. We say we believe in democracy. We say we believe in human rights, but we don't. You know how I know we don't? Because we don't act like it. See, people act like they believe in gravity, but they don't act like they believe in God, and they don't act like they believe in family values. And I know this because people cheat on their spouses all the fucking time. So there's that. But these are all things, like I said, that Bush and Reagan really wanted to get done. They couldn't get it done. Let's move on to everyone else's, favorite neoliberal failure idiot. He's not an idiot. He was a success for the donor class. Barack Obama was the biggest cheerleader for corporate America. He ran a great campaign, 2008. I bought it. I had that one little moment in August of 2008 when the option came to take the private money or the public money. And believe it or not, John McCain took the public money, which was way less. Barack Obama opted for the private money. And he took more private money than any of his predecessors combined. Give you an idea. That's when I had that little moment, right? So I kind of started realizing, maybe he's full of shit, right? He was in the Senate 2 years, didn't do a whole lot, but I'm thinking, well, crap, he's got to be better than W, right? No. And we'll get into that. Well, actually, he was better than W for the donor class, and we'll just get through it. Let's first and foremost, his hallmark legislation. This is his hallmark thing. This is important. Okay, you guys, passing the ACA, the Affordable Care Act, which was a Heritage Foundation right-wing design plan that was developed under Richard Nixon, right? And Nixon couldn't get it through, so he had to settle for the HMO Act, which, if you know what that is, HMOs aren't, but he made them legal because they're having issues, and he made them legal. And why did he make them legal? Because he was friends with Kaiser. But let's look at the failure of the ACA. And if anybody knows how ACA works, a real quick rundown, because I could do an entire show on the Affordable Care Act. But a quick rundown of the ACA. It's mandated that we all buy insurance. In fact, when the Republicans took it to the Supreme Court, believe it or not, John Roberts, the conservative Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, was the deciding vote. And he said that it wasn't illegal because all it is a new tax rule, which was true. Because up until Trump took away the penalty, you had to have insurance or you were going to be penalized. But wait a minute, I thought this was supposed to help poor people. How can poor people be penalized if they can't afford insurance? Let that sink in for a second. That was the ACA. So a bunch of our money went to subsidize insurance companies so they could, quote unquote, afford to sell insurance cheaper, on the open market. Every state's got the open enrollment thing. And so what ended up happening was you had these rotten plans that cover some, the physicals and all of that. But you try getting sick on one of those plans, you're looking at $6,000 to $8,000 for a deductible before the insurance will kick in. So let's just say you got cancer. Okay. You got to spend $8,000 before insurance kicks in. And that's $8,000 per calendar year, not $8,000 one time. So let's just say it's September. You find out you get cancer. Well, we all know cancer doesn't go away in a month. Okay. So now we're at the end of calendar year, December. Now you got to spend another $8,000 from January to the next December before the insurance kicks in. Now you're in the hole. Let's just say this is a 2-year period. I know people that have had cancer. It's a year and a half, 2 years, sometimes 3 to deal with it between all the chemo treatments and everything else. Well, now you're in the whole $30,000. That's reprehensible. That's just egregious. And so this is why you get like 1 million bankruptcies a year for medical reasons. And these people had insurance. And the Affordable Care Act is only one example. He never made it illegal for insurance to deny people, which if you listen to my show coming out this week, Thursday with Dr. Joe Jarvis, we get into all the ways that you're paying for insurance. People go, oh, well, Medicare is too expensive. You're already paying 5 times. But listen to that show and you'll get it. Pre-COVID, after the ACA was passed, we had 50,000 deaths a year, 45,000 deaths a year pre-COVID due to a lack of insurance coverage. People were dying because they didn't have care. Okay. This is pre-COVID. Now, 200,000 people that have, of the 910,000 people that have died, it's like 250,000 people probably wouldn't have died if they had insurance. Of those 910,000 people that died, 250,000 people did not have coverage. So they couldn't even go to the doctor for COVID. How do we find out they had COVID? When they died and the van came to get them, oh, COVID. Okay. Pre-COVID, we left 40 million people uninsured in this country and have been uninsured for 8-10 years up until COVID. Then COVID happened. And then how many people lost their jobs? How many people were thrown out in the streets? Right. So we had 40 million people uninsured. And then COVID came. And how many more people were left uninsured? During a pandemic, Joe Biden couldn't even see his way to clear Medicare for all during an emergency during a pandemic. Right. But let's stick with Barack Obama. I'll get into Biden here for a little bit. He's only been president a year and he's a colossal fuck up ass kiss to the, big insurance guys himself. But Obama, after winning the Nobel Prize, took Bush's 2 illegal wars, Afghanistan and Iraq, and turned them into 7. Most of you probably don't know this. I took it for granted that people knew this because I follow this crap. But I was back in LA during Christmas time and I was waiting for my cousin and his partner in this to come into this bar that I was waiting for him at in Silver Lake. I was watching the game, started talking to this lady, chit-chatting, initially about football, and then got into politics. Right. It's LA. They do that there too. So, when I was bitching about Trump, no problem. All right. And then when I started getting into Biden, she goes, oh, well, wait a minute. I go, hey, started telling her about his deportations, everything else. And then I said, and Obama was no prince. And she goes, well, I was kind of disappointed. I said, well, why were you disappointed? She said, well, he didn't get a lot done that he said he was going to do. I said, well, he also took 2 illegal wars and turned them into 7. And right away she goes, wait a minute. That was Bush. No, hang on. Bush got us into Iraq and Afghanistan. But Obama got us into Libya, Syria, Sudan, Somalia, and Yemen via the Saudis. And she goes, well, I didn't know that. Oh, you didn't know that? You didn't hear about the Libyan rape squads that Gaddafi supposedly had? That they were human rights violations and they were raping women on Viagra, which turned out to be WMDs. None of that was true at all, but we needed an excuse to go bomb Libya and take their oil, which is what we did. And Obama later said, oh, I really regretted that. You should be in jail for that. That's a goddamn war crime. But most people didn't know that. So now I'm saying it. Okay. And probably more. I remember the first couple months of the Trump administration, we lost those 4 guys in Niger, Niger. I didn't even know where Niger was. I had to look it up on the map. It's smack in the middle of Africa. And I'm kind of going, why are we there? Why are we there? That's not even near where we supposedly have problems, right? In 2016, Obama dropped 26,000 bombs in the Middle East. In 2015, he ran out of bombs for 3 weeks. That's how many bombs he was dropping on people. His drone strikes killed something like, between him and Bush, they killed like 6 million people in the Middle East. We wonder why we don't have any friends over there. But 90% of Obama's drone strikes were civilian targets, right? Oops, accident, meant to blow up this guy in the house. Oh, sorry, we took out the whole block. Oops, oopsie daisy. Oh, well, collateral damage. And we use these stupid euphemisms, which I'm sorry, they're not stupid. They're stupid to me because you got to be an inhuman piece of shit to want to use them. But they're stupid. But they're not stupid to the people who want to sell this shit to people, right? That's why we say things like collateral damage. We don't say civilian deaths. We don't say cold-blooded murder. We say collateral damage, right? So, we enhanced interrogation. We don't say torture. That's what it is. It's torture. And if you know anything about torture, it's not terribly effective, because if you got a car battery hooked up to my nipples and you're pulling out my fingernails, I'm going to tell you pretty much that Santa Claus killed JFK, right? He inherited, in 2009, after he became president, and he inherited TARP, right? The asset relief program that Bush left behind for him, kicking out 6.1 million families out of their homes, bailing out the banks with no support for the victims. And then they say, well, he inherited that. People say he inherited that from Bush. He couldn't help that. He inherited that from Bush. Well, no. See, he became president now with a Democratic supermajority, which means you can do whatever the fuck you want. You could bail out homeowners for $1 trillion, the same way he bailed out the banks for nearly $1 trillion, right? But what did he do in March of 2009 after he became president? Had a big breakfast at the White House. All the top execs from all the big banks were at this breakfast where he basically said, hey, listen, the people out there with pitchforks, but I'm the one. I got it. I got you. I'm the one standing between you and the pitchforks. Nothing to do, zero convictions. His DOJ did nothing. Eric Holder was just nothing, zero convictions. Meanwhile, in Iceland, they handed out like 30 or 40 prison sentences, 5 to 25 years, right? In Vietnam, they hung 3 guys. We didn't do any of that here, right? For the victims, we started spinning this media narrative. Jim Cramer's on CNBC, the quote liberal business channel, and Fox News, Fox Business both said the same thing. Oh, what happened was people got too much house that they couldn't afford. And that was true in some cases, but many of them were flat out fucking defrauded. If you ever read Chain of Title by Dave Dayen, it gets into that big time. And a real quick side note, under Kamala Harris's tutelage, when she was the Attorney General of California, she refused, to indict Steve Mnuchin and the executive board of One West Bank when her investigators said, hey, we have 1,000 cases of flat out mortgage fraud. This is enough to indict, and we need to investigate more because there's going to be more of these. And she flat out said no. And isn't it interesting that One West Bank is a subsidiary of Goldman Sachs, which coincidentally contributed to Kamala Harris's 2 attorney general campaign races, her Senate race, and her presidential run. And Steve Mnuchin went on to become, wait for it, the Secretary of the Treasury under Donald Trump. So when I say these people are not your friends, the hell's Kamala Harris taking money from a right-wing piece of shit like that? Well, because she's a right-wing piece of shit. Because she jailed over 100,000 black and brown people under bullshit drug laws. And under her tutelage, we had literally 40% of California state firefighters fighting real fires in the woods for $1 an hour. No death benefit, no pension, nothing. Thank you, Kamala Harris. Obama, but let's get back to Obama now, shall we? He cracked the heads of peaceful protesters. I'm not going to say this is well known. I knew when this was happening, but apparently it's not well known. He shut down Occupy. He helped quash Occupy. He tried to quash BLM, but he basically assisted in defanging them. He sat idle during the teacher strikes that were going on. I'm going to put on a soft shoe. I'm going to get out there. He didn't do jack or shit. During the DAPL thing, Dakota Access Pipeline protests. Well, let's just give it a few weeks and see how it plays out. People were getting hosed in the winter with fire hoses, chased down by dogs. Right? These are Native Americans, right, who are protesting a pipeline going through their land. Oh, and by the way, last year Joe Biden approved 3,000 oil drilling contracts on, wait for it, federal and tribal lands. So there you go. The United States has never met a treaty it didn't wipe its ass with. Okay, that's what we do. So when we say, well, we made a deal, no, trust me. Obama deported more legal asylum seekers than his predecessors. Biden is nearly passing Obama in 1 year. He's already deported 700,000 legal asylum seekers, which was more than Trump did in 4 years. And Trump's first 4 years were half of Obama's first 4 years. So what does that tell you about these people? And why are they getting away with it? Why are the kids in cages now called facilities and there's no press access? The press can't go down there and cover this stuff, right? And what did Kamala Harris do last fall? She went down to the border and said, don't come. Don't come. It's dangerous. Don't come. Basically, we're going to kill you or deport you if you come. When she was running for vice president with Biden in 2020, she was at these rallies and she's talking her mad shit. And she's saying, oh, yeah, this is America. We're a melting pot. Beep, 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 beep. Now it's don't come. Don't come. It's dangerous. And if you've ever seen her interviewed, she's a moron. She can't handle anything off script, kind of like Joe Biden. And this thing, we never ask, where are these people coming from? We never ask what countries these people are coming from that the neoliberals fucked up. And when I say neoliberals, I also throw the conservatives into that, because if you ever notice, our foreign policy doesn't matter who's president. We're still bombing Syria, right? We're still in Libya, right? And even though we pulled out of Afghanistan, we still have the CIA and contractors in Afghanistan, and we're still sanctioning Afghanistan, starving their kids. Right. Because we got pissed that after 20 years and, $3 trillion, however much we flushed down the toilet, we replaced the Taliban with the Taliban. Right. But, look at the South American countries. I'll get back to, the border here. You look at the South American countries that we screwed over: Guatemala, El Salvador, Honduras, where we arrested the president of Honduras in his pajamas, Manuel Zelaya, in 2009 for the crime of raising the minimum wage. Right. And what happened? They are now the highest per capita murder. They have the highest per capita murder rate in the world after they've had, 4 Banana Republic dictator presidents that we installed. In fact, in 2016, before Obama left office, he made sure that the guy that took third place in that election in Honduras became president. Okay. Him and the CIA. Isn't that interesting? Kind of like here with this electoral college crap that we have. Oh, and I know what you're going to say, and go piss off, because if you think the electoral college is even remotely democratic, then you need to reread the Federalist Papers, because we are not a democracy. Obama also jailed more journalists and whistleblowers than any of his predecessors combined since the Espionage Act, which is what he used, which is an anti-spying law that he went after journalists and whistleblowers with, i.e. Julian Assange, who's now still rotting in Belmarsh prison in Britain because of the United States and Barack Obama and Donald Trump and Joe Biden. But Obama put away, including friend of the show, John Kiriakou, who's been on this show before. He was a victim of that. He was one of the first he was the first whistleblower that Obama put in jail. And this is the funny thing. He was a whistleblower under the Bush administration. Okay. He came on and he didn't leak anything or download anything. His big crime was going on Nightline and talking to Ted Koppel, because he was the CIA station chief in Pakistan for counterterrorism. And he was saying that we were torturing people, and that's illegal. And John Brennan wanted to put him in jail, and Bush was like, no, let it slide. Then Obama becomes president. Brennan reapproaches him with the same concept. And Obama's like, yeah, sure. Okay. Let's teach him a lesson. They put him in jail for 23 months, destroyed his life, and he's rebuilding it, but he got divorced out of it. He has a wife and 5 kids. He got divorced out of it. He's rebuilding his life. I mean, he's got his radio show now and stuff, and he's just, trying to get things back in order. And he's out there, doing the good thing. But, he's a friend of the show. He's been on before. He's been on several times. But he was one of the first guys. We just put away people last year. We are just not a good country, you guys. But Obama jailed, and Obama was not a good president. Okay, he was a piece of shit. And so here we go. He jailed more whistleblowers under the Espionage Act than all of his predecessors combined since the act was signed in 1917. Under Trump, we cried fascist, when Jim Acosta lost his lunch pass. Biden calls a Fox News reporter a stupid son of a bitch, and the shit libs all go, well, he was rude. Wow, I thought we were becoming a fascist state because, Trump took away the hall pass from a spoiled, rotten CNN reporter who, if you've ever seen him on CNN, he is just a goddamn corporate tool. But meanwhile, some asshole from Fox is rude to the president. And instead of saying, yeah, well, it's America, you can be rude to the president's just like any other man, technically, right? No, apparently it's okay when a quote Democratic president does it, but God forbid you are a conservative president, then you're a fascist. Before I start wrapping up here, and I know I'm going to go a little long today, excuse me, I've been yakking for a few minutes here. I'm going to take a little sip of whiskey and soda. Before we start wrapping this whole thing up today, I want to make that point, if I haven't made it already, that if you're voting for either of these parties, you've been had. You've been hoodwinked. You've been run amok. You've been bamboozled. You've been flim-flammed. What's another good word? Jerry-rigged, hornswoggled, whatever. You bought a pig in a poke, man. You're getting screwed, and we're getting screwed because we're taxpayers in this country, and we do not get a bang for our taxpayer buck like they do everywhere else. And not a Democratic president or a Republican president is ever going to say no to the military or the military-industrial complex. They're just not going to do it, which means we have to start getting some balls. But that's why Democratic presidents get away with stuff that Republican presidents just, salivate over. Reagan and George, the first George Bush, they couldn't do what Clinton did, not by a long shot. You think Bush 1 could have gotten DOMA through the Defense of Marriage Act, the Anti-Gay Marriage Act? No way. That's a Clinton move, right? George W. Bush 2 could never do what Obama did, and so far, what Biden is doing, Biden is getting away with way more than Trump did, way more. Last year we tried to pull a coup in Nicaragua because we didn't like the way their election went because they voted for Ortega again. I mean, who the hell are we? Meanwhile, in this country, we don't have a minimum wage. George Bush backed off of that. He backed off of the student loan forgiveness, right? It started off at 50 grand. If you have, we're going to forgive 50 grand of your student loan debt. So if you had like 300,000, they're going to knock off 50. If you had 100,000, they're going to knock off 50. Then it came down to like 15, then 5. Then I think it's $5 and 2 Taco Bell coupons. It's non-existent. The minimum wage went away. Suddenly the parliamentarian, which is a hired position, it is not a elected position. When the Republicans had an issue with the parliamentarian about 10, 12 years ago, they fired the guy and replaced him with somebody else to make $174,000 to basically just do what we say, right? The parliamentarian makes the recommendation to the Democratic House and the Senate that the minimum wage would be too expensive, blah, 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 blah. And suddenly Biden's like, oh yeah, we got the parliamentarian. It's just ridiculous. More deportations. Biden has deported 700,000 legal asylum seekers. And let me remind you what a legal asylum seeker is really quick. It's not MS-13 or these gang things that, we keep hearing about to scare people. Illegal, again, countries that we fuck up, that we screw up, places like democracies like Colombia and Guatemala and El Salvador, they get fucked over. Those people want to leave because we've made their lives intolerable. They're not making any money. They get paid jack and shit because Chiquita Banana doesn't want to pay a decent minimum wage. Manuel Zelaya got busted because his $2.10 a day minimum wage got raised to $2.75. And Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama was like, that's ridiculous. Can't have that because Chiquita Banana lost her shit. So we had arrested a sitting president that was democratically elected, who was not some major socialist guy, and took him away in an airplane in his pajamas because we're just a bunch of bully ass motherfuckers. So, but that's what legal asylum is. People fleeing, political persecution. They're being chased by gangs. Maybe they're being extorted into oblivion, and there is no real police to protect them because in a broke country, the police are on the take too. Kind of like here, but at least the police make enough money to at least put out the, I technically can't bribe a cop. But I know better. If I'm Jeff Bezos, I can bribe whoever the fuck I want. But Obama's had more deportations, expanded the military. He threw in another $30 billion on top of the budget this year. Expanded the Capitol Police by $2 billion to turn them into a national agency. What's the motivation for that? Because they did such a great job at the Capitol riots on January 6th, 2021. Really? I mean, I can go on. More bombs, more weapons, no Medicare. We cut unemployment last year. I just saw a stupid report today that crime's going up. Well, maybe crime's going up because you kick people out of their jobs, you kick people out of their homes, you shut down small business. By the way, the business community, the Republicans and the right wing, and some Democrats will say how much they love business. Bullshit, because you shut down a ton of small business in this country, 35% of which were Black and brown owned. So for the so-called liberal who says they love minorities, you just shut down business that was in families for generations. You destroyed generational wealth overnight. And these are your friends? This is who you're voting for? Vote blue. Any blue will do. Fuck you. Fuck you. This time, this midterm, this 2022, man, it's going to be ugly. It's going to be ugly because I'm going to have every Chewy blue up my ass to vote for Lloyd Doggett, whoever the fuck is in my district running for whatever. And they're going to say, oh my God, you better, because otherwise, like Beto O'Rourke is running for governor against Governor Hot Wheels, Greg Abbott. Beto O'Rourke, who lost against Ted Cruz because he had a shit little message, right? He was basically the same neoliberal crap. The same Beto O'Rourke who voted for banking deregulation 3 times, twice under Donald Trump, has voted for every military appropriation that came by his desk. He did not care. He is not your friend. But now he's going to run against Greg Abbott, right? Is he going to be better than Greg Abbott? It would be better than having Governor Hot Wheels in there with a stupid abortion law. But like I said, if the Democrats did care about abortion, a Democratic Congress could pass a law, Biden can sign it, and Greg Abbott would be out of a political talking point just like that. But they won't do it. Beto O'Rourke is not your friend either. Robert Francis O'Rourke is not Beto any more than Ted Cruz is not Rafael. Rafael Cruz is not Ted Cruz, vice versa, whatever. But yeah, and there's more. I mean, there's more. I mean, last year alone, Biden's failures were just, there's a list of like 50 things that I kind of keep a running list of. And I did a show on this around the fall last year, before the year was even finished out. You want to go listen to that show, you're more than welcome to. But the main point of all this, again, and these people are not your friends. Democrat, Republican, it's just bullshit. They're both run by the same kleptocrats. You know, corporations run these craven cowards and they run their offices. You are not in control here. If 30 million people had balls, if 30 million people had guts and quit watching fucking television and would just vote their conscience, if 30 million people divided up against 3 parties, if the Democrats and Republicans barely won any of their seats and barely won a presidency because there was no longer a plurality. People forget that Bill Clinton did not win with a majority ever in 92 or 96. He won with like 39, 41% because Ross Perot came in and gummed up the works and he got 15 and 17% of the vote. That's a ton of votes, right? If people would do that again and scare the shit out of these people and let them know that we're not gonna put up with your crap anymore and we're this close to a goddamn revolution, excuse me, and a real one too. I don't mean this January 6th crap, you know, the election was stolen. No. First of all, these candidates are not ever really elected. They're already hand selected. We already know who's going to be the president. It's a fix. It's a rig. It's a rig. And if you think it's not, the nomination process is a joke. I mean, at least the Republicans don't have superdelegates. The Democratic Party is a complete rig, 100%. If you think Joe Biden got that nomination, honestly, you don't know what you're talking about. Hillary Clinton, that was a total sham. But the corporations wanted her. The corporations wanted Joe Biden. And they even got their way with Donald Trump. They just didn't like how he did it. You're not supposed to tell the truth. Not like he was Abe Lincoln. But, you know, you're not supposed to say, yeah, we're killers. You think we're innocent? There's a lot of killers. You're not supposed to say that when somebody asks you if Putin is a killer. You're supposed to do the party line and say, yeah, and we're going to go after him and we're going to make him pay. That's what you're supposed to say. You're not supposed to say, what, you think we're innocent? We're all killers. You're not supposed to say that. You're not supposed to say we're in Syria because of the oil. We're going to keep the oil that we stole in Syria. You're not supposed to say that. We're just going to do it, but you're not supposed to say it. You're supposed to say we're in there for human rights. We're in there because women don't have rights, because make up your whatever, you know, bullshit bleeding heart thing you want to make up. It's bullshit because nobody believes it. Because if they believed it, they would act like it. The United States is not a democracy. We're not about democracy. We're about going into countries and taking their shit for free and making people work for nothing to satisfy the profit margins of the corporations. And that's about it, man. The both parties, they, if people would vote differently, they would wake the fuck up. That's about it. I'm out of pages. And so show's pretty much over. Again, you guys, thebittertruth.info. Appreciate the support of the show. And as always, if this stuff makes you uncomfortable, it's supposed to. Sleep tight.